I never thought life would take this turn. Not like this, not with him. The night he walked into my life, everything changed. I was at this dimly lit bar downtown, minding my own business, sipping my wine, feeling like a stranger in my own skin. Then Salvador walked in. Tall, dark, and terrifyingly magnetic, he had this air about him that screamed danger. But there was something else, too. A charm that was impossible to ignore. He moved through the crowd like he owned the place, and honestly, he probably did. When our eyes met, something ignited. I knew I should look away, but I couldn't. He made his way over, each step closer, sending an electric pulse through me. By the time he reached me, my heart was racing. "Rachel," he said, his voice a deep rumble that I felt more than heard. It sent chills down my spine. He knew my name. How? I didn't dare ask. "Come with me." It wasn't a question, and for some reason, I followed. Salvador's world was nothing like mine. My life was simple, quiet, a little lonely, but manageable. His was a chaotic mix of power, control, and a darkness I couldn't begin to understand. But he had this way of making me feel seen. He'd pull me close, his hand rough and possessive on the small of my back, his eyes fierce and unyielding. That first night was just the beginning. He took me to his penthouse overlooking the city, and as I looked out at the lights, he looked at me like I was the only thing that mattered. We didn't talk much. Words weren't necessary. The tension spoke for itself, and before I knew it, he had me in his arms, pulling me into a world I had no business being in. "I don't share," he murmured, his lips brushing my ear. "You're mine now, Rachel." It was possessive, controlling even, but I liked it. No one had ever wanted me like that before. Days turned into weeks, and somehow I became part of his world. I never asked questions about his business. I wasn't naive. I knew he was dangerous, that he had blood on his hands. But when we were together, he made me feel protected, like nothing could touch me. But the danger was always there, lingering in the background. Sometimes I'd catch him on the phone, speaking in rapid Italian, his voice laced with authority and the occasional threat. Those calls reminded me of what I was risking by being with him. My ex-boyfriend, Nate, had warned me about men like Salvador, men who could make you feel alive only to tear you apart when it suited them. But Salvador wasn't like anyone I'd ever known. One evening, I came across something I shouldn't have. A gun tucked away in his drawer, next to a thick stack of cash. The sight of it sent a shiver down my spine. Salvador caught me looking and closed the drawer, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be poking around, Bella," he said, his tone dangerously low. But instead of backing off, I felt a strange thrill. This was Salvador, dangerous, unpredictable, and completely captivating. "You have a lot of secrets," I whispered, daring him to deny it. He stepped closer, his eyes intense. "And so do you. We all do, Rachel." Salvador's obsession with me grew. He'd call at odd hours, send flowers to my door, insist on knowing where I was and who I was with. At first, it felt thrilling, being the object of his intense desire. But soon, his control started to feel like chains around my wrists, binding me tighter every day. One evening, after a particularly intense argument, he kissed me with a force that stole my breath. "You can't run from me," he said, his fingers gripping my chin. "You belong to me now." I wanted to protest, but part of me liked the way he claimed me. The other part, it was terrified. One night I decided to break free, if only for a moment. I slipped out of his penthouse and returned to my tiny apartment, craving some normalcy. It didn't last long. Salvador showed up, his face a mask of fury. "Did you really think you could just walk away?" he asked, his voice cold. "I needed space," I shot back. "I'm not one of your possessions." He laughed, dark and low. "You're more than that, Rachel. You're mine." I didn't know whether to hate him or love him. Both, maybe. It was a confusing, thrilling mess that I couldn't resist. But cracks started forming. His lifestyle was catching up to us, pulling us into a world of danger I couldn't ignore. Nate, my ex, came back into my life, warning me about Salvador, about the darkness surrounding him. But it was too late. I was in too deep. Nate showed up one night, urging me to leave. "He's dangerous, Rachel. You don't know what he's capable of." I shook my head, torn. I know exactly who he is, but it's not that simple. It never is. One night, everything exploded. Salvador's enemies closed in, and he was pulled into a war that I had no part in but couldn't escape. I was just another pawn in his high-stakes world. A pawn he claimed but couldn't protect. Salvador was ruthless, yes, but he wasn't invincible. He held me close, a rare softness in his eyes. "If anything happens to me, Rachel, promise me you'll walk away. Promise me you'll find happiness, even if it's without me." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes, knowing it might be the last time he'd ever hold me. When the bullets started flying, everything slowed down. Salvador pushed me behind him, shielding me, taking a hit that was meant for me. It was chaos, guns firing, shouts echoing, but all I saw was him. He fell to his knees, his hands slipping from mine. "No," I whispered, dropping beside him, cradling his face. "You can't leave me, Salvador. Not like this." He tried to smile, pain etched on his face. "I told you, you were mine." Salvador survived, but things were never the same. He'd protected me, but the price was steep. Trust shattered, fear replacing love. We tried to pick up the pieces, but too much had been lost. My heart ached with the weight of everything we'd been through. The love, the lies, the betrayal. Salvador's near death changed everything. He wasn't the same after that night. The once untouchable man I knew now bore a vulnerability that made him all the more human, but it didn't make him weaker. If anything, he seemed even more dangerous, like he had nothing left to lose. Despite the threats around us, he kept me close, insisting that he wouldn't let me go. Not now, not ever. Our love became our own secret battlefield. Every moment was steeped in danger, but he refused to let me walk away. "I'd rather die than see you leave," he whispered one night, holding me as if I were his lifeline. But I saw the way he looked at me, desperation mingling with a love that bordered on obsession. My ex, Nate, tried once more to convince me to leave Salvador. This time, I felt no pull. My love for Salvador had woven itself into my bones. "This life isn't safe for you, Rachel," Nate warned. But I only felt anger rise. "You don't get it, Nate. I'm not leaving him." Nate's frustration burned, but he saw my resolve and finally walked away. One night, Salvador opened up about his past, his father's betrayal, the family's secrets that had made him this way. "I never knew trust, Rachel, until you." It was a raw confession, and in his vulnerability, I saw the man he could have been, a man shaped by loyalty and love, not power and violence. But Salvador's world didn't slow down. Rival families wanted him gone, and it became clear we were constantly being watched. The tension was unrelenting, and soon I felt like I was living with a target on my back. He assured me that everything was under control, but fear lingered between us like an unspoken threat. I began to wonder if I could live in his world forever. I loved him, but love wasn't always enough to survive. And yet, every time I thought of leaving, he'd do something that pulled me back. A soft touch, a whispered promise, a kiss that told me I was his everything. The final straw came one night when I was caught in the crossfire of Salvador's enemies. Salvador's rage was a force of nature. He protected me, his fury terrifying, but his hold on me was more possessive than ever. He wouldn't let anyone touch me, physically or emotionally. I realized I'd become just as obsessed with him as he was with me. His world was dangerous, yet the thrill of it all was intoxicating. I found myself addicted to the rush of danger, to Salvador's fierce love that demanded all of me. But beneath the obsession, there was still love, a love that blossomed in whispered words and stolen moments. I knew he wanted me safe, but he couldn't change who he was. He was bound to his world, and now, so was I. My loyalty was put to the test when rumors circulated that Salvador was planning to leave his family's empire. His enemies saw it as weakness, and it felt like the beginning of a war. Despite everything, I couldn't let him walk away from his family for me. We fought, my heart breaking as I told him to stay true to himself. You don't need to change who you are for me, Salvador. He looked at me, his gaze a mix of frustration and love, and I knew he understood. Salvador's decision to stay with his family meant more chaos, more violence, but also more love. We accepted the mess of our lives, knowing it was worth every sacrifice. For the first time, we faced our future together. No more secrets between us. Salvador's family disapproved of me, believing I was a distraction, but he fought for us. He defended our love, making it clear that I was here to stay. His loyalty became a shield, and I knew I was exactly where I belonged. One evening, while lying together, Salvador made a quiet vow. No one's ever gonna take you from me, Rachel. Not my enemies, not my family, no one. His words were more than a promise. They were a declaration. Our love had reached a peak, and I felt as if nothing could break us. But Salvador's life continued to be a dark world of deception. I often wondered how much longer we could keep going. But every time, he'd hold me, his voice steady as he promised to keep me safe. There were days when I doubted us, and nights when I feared the danger might finally consume us. But each time, Salvador's love reminded me that some things were worth the risk. I was his, and he was mine. Salvador's enemies struck hard one night, their attack leaving us shaken. But we survived. Through the danger, through every challenge, we stood by each other, proving that our love was stronger than any force against us. We celebrated our survival, our love intensifying with every moment. Salvador finally let down his walls completely, and in his embrace, I found everything I'd ever needed. I knew then that no matter what the future held, I'd never regret choosing him. As time passed, our lives found a sense of peace. Salvador still held his power, but his love for me softened him in ways he didn't realize. His world was still a dangerous place, but with him I felt safe, secure in his fierce love and unwavering loyalty. One day, Salvador held me close, his voice warm as he whispered, "I was always yours, Rachel." I just didn't know it. I smiled, knowing that our love had been worth every fight, every scar, every sleepless night. The danger, the passion, the obsession, it was all part of the story that was uniquely ours. And that's just the beginning of Rachel and Salvador's journey, a love story that weaves through passion, danger, and the shadows of a world where loyalty and betrayal collide. Want to dive deeper into each twist and turn? Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to get the latest chapters as they unfold. Don't miss out on the rest of Rachel and Salvador's intense, unforgettable romance. Stay tuned for more.